Java, you have all these type of programming language. In the portfolio of language, why do we need one more language? This is very important. You all should have keep this in your mind. The reason why Python became extremely popular in modern times is it is extremely simple compared to C or C++ or Java. It is very easy to learn and use Python. Second thing is being an open source. A lot of libraries were developed for Python. So almost anything you can think, it's available as libraries. And it can be used, means Python can be used to call that library. So you don't have, means your job becomes less. And it is available in almost every programming language, meaning operating systems like Windows, Macs, or all the popular distributions of Linux, etc. And then actually it contains, means it comes with a lot of good development environment for you to develop code and execute. So these are some of the reasons why Python is popular. If you answer in one sentence, it is the simplicity of Python that made it extremely popular. So now, but as I explained, right, it's a language. That's why I just quoted that language of the serpents and the language of Python. So suppose I'm trying to learn a new language. For example, if I'm learning French, how do I learn? I have to sit and understand the words of that language, and I need to understand the meaning of the words. And then eventually I need to understand the grammar of the language. How can I connect sentence? Means words to form a sentence. And how can I connect sentences to form a story or a content? So this is what I do. And as an early learner of the language, or as a learner of the language, you can make three types of mistakes. One is the first and foremost type of mistake is known as syntax error. Syntax error means you're not using the language syntax properly. For example, you might be using a word that doesn't have any meaning. You might be not structuring the sentences properly. You might be making a grammar mistake. And that type of mistake is known as syntax error. So syntax error means there is something wrong. You must remember that when you learn a language, just like English, you need to understand the words and you need to understand the grammar. Like that, you need to understand this Python basic keywords as well as the grammar. If you make a mistake, it is known as an error. The second mistake is known as a logical error. So there are three types of mistakes you can make with any programming language. The first type of mistake is a syntax error. So for example, if you are writing a for loop, you make a mistake in the syntax, the Python will immediately show it as a syntax error. The second one is a logical error. So in your logic, meaning you might be executing a logic, syntactically it is correct, but that logic may not be good enough, or there is some error in the logic. So for example, you may want to see all the values above a certain level. That is how you wanted to check a particular criteria. For example, gradient descent. If you take, you wanted to iterate until the next iteration is not moving below a particular point. So instead of below, if you put above, the code will work perfectly, but there is a logical error. So this is called as logical error. So the first type of error is syntax error. The second type of error is called a logical error. And there is one more error. The one more error means you may execute the program exactly you designed, but it may not reach the final destination, or it may not yield the end result. And that type of error is known as semantic error. So these are the three types of errors that can be made with any programming language. So we need to be careful of all these things. So now let's see Python as a language. So Python is an interpreted language. There are two types of language. One type of language is known as compiled language, and the second type of language is known as interpreted language. Anybody? Do you know the difference between compiler and interpreter?
One goes line by line, and the other goes, compiles the whole thing and then runs.
I'm sorry?
One one of them goes line by line. The interpreter one goes executes its line by line,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one compiles the whole thing as a exe and then runs it.
Okay, excellent. What is an advantage and disadvantage? Anybody else?
I think the interpreter one, you can, because it's doing line by line, it will stop as soon as it sees the first error, and it's easy to debug. On the exe, then you would have to uh, debug it line by line to see exactly where it's going and catch the error.
Right, that is also true.
And the compiled language should be faster than the interpreted one.
Correct, correct. Why?
Performance.
Why the compiled, means that is correct. Why the compiled language should be faster than the interpreted language?
Because it's already converted into machine language.
Excellent. Okay. So let me go back and ask a very fundamental question. Please excuse me for asking such a ridiculous question. Why do we need a compiler or interpreter?
To convert the instruction to machine language.
Yes, beautiful. So first of all, the hardware will understand only the machine language. This is the 8th grade computer science. So the hardware can understand only the language of zeros and ones, but it's impossible for a human being to write that language. So you need to have a tool in between which converts whatever you write in a high level language to a machine level language. And this conversion can happen in two different ways. One is compiler, the other one is interpreter. As you have explained, the compiler, what it does is, let's say that you have written one story in English. And let's take this in English, right? And you wanted to or you have written that in Hindi. Let's say that you have written one story in Hindi and you wanted to convert that into English. You can do that in two ways. One way is you can take the entire story, you can translate the entire story into a paper, and thereafterwards, when somebody asks for that English version, you don't need even the original English version, sorry, Hindi version. You can just keep on reading the Hindi version. Sorry, Hindi, you don't need the original Hindi version. You can just keep on reading the English version. So that means you, second time when you execute, you don't need a translation because the translation is already done. For example, if you take a program in C, like let's say that hello world.c, which is the famous first program in C, you write printf hello world, and after that you come, means how do you save it? You save that language into hello world.c. That hello world.c is a program written in a high level language. And the next step you do is you go there and you try to compile. When you compile, what happens? The compiler will link all the libraries you have included. For example, in the hello world.c, you might have included stdio.h, the standard input output library. So all the code related to print input output library will be linked to this code, and it is converted into a machine language and store it as hello world.exe. So next time when you execute the hello world.exe, you don't need to look at hello world.c. So second time onwards, it will execute very fast. Whereas BASIC is a language you are familiar with. Python is a language you are familiar with. They use interpreters. So if you write an interpreter, every time, take that Hindi English example. Another means is every time somebody asks for this English translation, somebody can take the Hindi paper, read one by line, and immediately translate. So the first line, Mera naam Rajesh. So it will translate, my name is Rajesh. Then the second line, it will read, it will translate like that. So the difficulty is every time you need to execute, It will start from the high level language, which is the high level Python or basic, and every time it will dynamically translate at the time of the execution. So the advantage is like advantage of using the interpreter is like if there is an error, you know exactly where the code stuck, that is where the error is. Whereas compiling, you have no idea because it will scan through the entire code and it will give you the entire result. If you might have used the programming language called COBOL, like when you compile, you may get 5,700 errors, something like that in one shot. This is the problem. Clear?
Yep.
Okay. Now, how to run the Python code? Actually, you can do in two different forms. One is called an interactive mode. It is known as terminal, where you can type one or a set of commands, and when you press the enter, it will execute. And the second method is you can write a script in a IDE, and then you can execute it. So let me pause here. Have you all installed the Python in your laptop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we have. I mean, we have
Yes.
Anaconda.
Anaconda.
What I
Okay.
had asked everybody to install.
Oh, okay. So that's perfectly fine. So when you use Anaconda, you can use both the mode. You can use this interact. There is a mode called terminal. If you take the terminal, it will be this interactive mode. And if you take the programming language, meaning the Jupyter Notebook, or there is one more. There was one more.
Spider.
Spider, yeah. These two, it is kind of a script mode. These are the two different modes. Okay. So then there are popular implementations are there because being an open source model, anybody can create an IDE for Python. Some of the popular tools, IDE, one is CPython, meaning it is mainly used for web development, application development, and some scripting. So you can download this from the Python website itself. So that is one IDE. And then we used Anaconda. It's really, if you are using machine learning, etc., this is really good because it contains a lot of libraries that is good for machine learning, data science, etc. Then there is an Iron Python. There is another open source implementation. It is built on .NET framework, and you can use Visual Studio. And there is Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook is there with Anaconda, and Jupyter Notebook is available even in the cloud. For example, if you go to Azure, you can get a Jupyter Notebook there. So these are some of the popular implementations of Python. So I'm assuming that most of you are using Anaconda and Jupyter Notebook. I personally use Azure Jupyter Notebook, but for that you need to have an internet connection always. So those are some of the basic introductory concepts. Now let's go to the language and drill that down a little bit in detail. So first let's start with constants. What is constant? Constant by definition, constant means it is fixed values. It could be numbers, it could be letters, or it could be strings. Because why they are called as a constant means their value will not change throughout a session. So numeric constants are there. So for example, 1, 2, 3, because or 4, 5, 6, that is called as numeric constants because they are numbers. And then there are string constants, and the string constants can be represented by either single quotes or double quotes. You can see this example here. So this is, so numeric constants are, means you can see two types. This is an integer and this is a floating point number, and this is a string. And you can have, for example, if you need to have a single quote within the string, you may have to use the double quotes. That's what it is. So then let's see the reserved words. See, reserved words means these words are keywords of Python. If you take English, there is thousands of reserved words. But in Python, the number of reserved words are very less. You can see these are the different reserved words used in Python. When a word is a reserved words, they cannot be used as a variable names at all. So it's not that big. So that's why Python is supposed to be easy compared to even any natural language. So just for your completeness, we put that in there. So false, class, return, is, finally. This is the only keywords, reserved words in Python. Now, how can I interact with Python? For that, I need to know the language. So the first thing is, if it is a terminal mode, first thing you may have to do is, it means if you have installed Python, and if Python is in your path, you can just go to command prompt and type Python 3. So you will get a prompt like this. When you get this prompt, that means Python interpreter is running. And whatever you type, it will display there. So if you type x equal to 1 and print x, the value of the x will be printed. And if you say that x equal to x plus 1 and print x, the value will be printed. Basically, this is the terminal mode. And for you to get the terminal mode, you may have to just go to the command prompt and just type Python 3. And even if you type Python, some of the implementations will bring that up. So this is a clear test to show that the Python is properly installed in your system. So the next one is, what are the elements of the Python? So when you think about an English language, you may have to have the words forms into sentence, and the sentence forms into a story or the detail. So first thing is vocabulary or words. So means that is the basic building block of the language, because any big program, even if the program has thousands of lines, it should be starting with this most elementary concepts. It is the word. Just like a thousands of pages book, even Mahabharata, which has 100,000 verses, it is constructed of the words. So any big program has to be constructed using the vocabulary or the words. And this vocabulary or the words used means we use them to put into valid sentences. Valid sentences means it has to follow the syntax. In other words, it has to follow the grammar of the language. In English itself, when you write a sentence, the sentence has to follow the syntax, or the sentence has to follow the grammar of the language. So like that, the basic Python constructs, which are words or the vocabulary, needs to be constructed properly in the form of a sentence. And once you have these sentences can be combined to form a structure, and multiple structure can combine and form an entire program. I mean, this appears to be ridiculously simple for you, but keep this in mind. This is how you do this structured programming. This will help you later point of time. So just understand that these are the different elements of the Python. So here is an example, right? So you can see in each words, and this words combine together to form a sentence, and that combine together to form a story or a program. This is what it is. So we talked about the reserved words already. Now, the second thing is how a words combine to form a sentences. The sentences can contain four major things. One is a variable, the second one is an operator, third one is a constant, and the fourth one is a function. This is how you form a sentence or lines. Every line of Python code should be a combination of these four. Need not be all four, but a combination. It could be one or two, etc. So take this sentence. You can see that a variable, an operator, a constant. Again, a variable, operator, a constant, another operator, a constant. Here you can see a function and a variable. So essentially what I was trying to say is that any sentence in your program should be a combination of these four: variable, operator, constant, and function. By the way, am I going too elementary level? Rajesh or anybody?
Yeah, I guess you can speed up if you want.
Okay, good. Good.
I mean, this is my take. I mean, are there other people who agree, or do you want to go with the space?
No, I agreed, Rajesh. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
We can go in a little bit more pace.
Yeah, we can speed up, I guess. I mean, these I think if you know any, if you have any basic programming experience, then I think these are all.
Excellent. No, that makes sense. So, okay. So with that, we can go forward. Then actually, but on a very high level, when you say how to combine these sentences into a story, program is essentially a sequence of steps. So some steps means you can be, there is conditional steps will be there, and some steps are iterative steps are there. So we will see that. So this is means you know typically what exactly is the condition, and you know what is the how it is being implemented. It will be implemented using an if constructs, and then there is a repetition is there. So the repetition is done using loops. So this is, we will explain this a little bit more detail, but the essence of what I was communicating today is just to understand that this is the structure of the language. The language is there. In that language, you have words. Words will form sentence. Sentence will form a sequence. And some couple of popular sequence is the conditional sequencing, and the other one is iterative sequencing. So this is a classic example of that initial language. So I'm not going to do that. Let's go to the next topic, which is variable. So variable. So let me pause here. Before, let me ask somebody, what is variable in your idea? Let me do.
Something where you can assign a value to.
Yeah. So when the interpreter see the variable, what is going to happen? Let's say that a equal to 5. In a typical programming language, how do you use the variable, and what happens when the interpreter sees that variable?
Basically, a space is allocated for that value, and
Yep.
then the values are put into it.
Okay. So exactly. So that's what happens. So a variable is a named space in the memory. That is very important. A named space in the memory where a programmer can store a data and later retrieve the data using the variable name. This is very important. So the programmers have to choose the name of the variable, and you can change the name of the variable later in the program. So when you change this x from 12.2, if I say type here x equal to 15, what is going to happen? The area reserved for x will be rewritten as 14 that or 15, whatever it is. That's what happens. So if you have learned C or any other programming language, suppose you want to use a variable, what do you do?
You have to predefine it.
Right. How do you declare it? That is what.
Declare it, exactly. That's what I
Yeah.
meant.
So
Yeah, sorry.
what exactly is the declaration?
It's basically the allocation of that variable. I mean, you define it
What
as a
what do you
string,
mean
or if you
declare?
you have to define that variable to a particular type.
Right. So you are saying that a equal to integer.
Right.
What does that tells that to the language or the computer?
A will have the value, a numerical value of an integer.
I need means when I say declaration, the declaration is an instruction to the compiler or interpreter and saying that I need a variable a which is of the type integer. And if I say that I need a variable b which is of the type floating point, and I need a variable c which is of the type character. What means what happens internally? Any difference? Because the floating point
They all require different amount of space.
exactly, that's it. But in Python it is a dynamic. You don't need to declare at all. You can just go ahead and define. So that's one major difference between other language and Python. So in Python, when you say here, you can just say that x equal to 12.2. So what is going to happen? From the constant by or whatever is on the right hand side, the interpreter will interpret. This should be the type of the data, and it will allocate the space accordingly. Now the problem is, right? So if I say int, means initially I say x equal to 5. And in the next line, I use x equal to 15.5. If you see what is going to happen, if I declare a variable as an integer, and if I assign, means allocate a floating point value to that number, what is going to happen in C?
You will get a syntax error.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Okay, you're declaring a variable x as integer. Okay, and then you're saying x equal to 5.5.
Yeah, but there is.
You'll basically get an error saying it can't be put into it, right?
It would be trimmed off.
Depending on the compiler, it will give you different results.
Right, that's true.
My understanding, again, my memory, it goes to long back. My understanding is that if it is a Pascal, it is going to give you an error. If it is a C, it will just give you 5 only. This is what my understanding, thinking. It could be different, but the way the compiler is written, it is going to respond that. But
true, I forget. Yeah, I forget the exact error too.
Yeah, my point of interest here is, if you declare a variable as integer, you can only store integer in that, right? That is true.
Yeah.
Any programming language, that is how you can show. But if in Python, it is an exception. You can initially store x equal to 5, and then you can store x equal to 15.35. So what is going to happen then? How the interpreter manages it?
It will convert the variable to a floating point variable.
Actually, what happens internally? It will drop the original memory location.
Oh, and then create another one.
Create a new location.
Okay.
Put the 15.5 there, and point that variable to the same variable to the new location. Let's say that initially the variable was created at memory location 5. When you say that variable, when you reassign that variable with a different data type, what is going to happen is, internally, a new location, new memory location, the space will be reserved, and accordingly the value will be reassigned. And then the next sentence, you can say that x equal to hello world. What is going to happen? A string will be created in the memory, and the location of that string will be assigned to the variable. So that's how it manages.
So the pointer remains the same. The area allocated for it gets dropped and created again.
Yeah, it may not be on the same location, but it will be created.
Right.
That's
Is it advisable to? Is it okay to use it freely like that, or does it have a impact on the memory collection and all that?
Absolutely not, because unlike the other programming language, the garbage collection is dynamic.
Okay. Yeah, that's the exact question I was going to ask.
So the garbage collection here is dynamic. It will, from time to time, it will collect the garbage and reuse it.
So doesn't that put a strain on the CPU? I mean,
no.
Okay.
See, not at all. These things are, of course, if it is a big machine learning problem and you're trying to do this multiple times, it is going to be a problem. But mind you, if you create a new variable, what is going to happen?
You
have to keep both the location.
Right.
The biggest disadvantage of this is that it can create confusion or readability, right? That's also important. So in one place you use x as an integer, other place you use as a string. Anybody who is reading the program will get confused.
So programmer ethics have to be good.
Yeah,
that's taken. Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah.
Anyway, anybody? Okay, any questions? So this is what it is. That's exactly what is being shown here. This is an important concept. You can change the of a variable in a later statement. Okay, so then some variable rule names, exactly what we talked earlier, right? So some people write variable names and only God can understand what exactly they meant by that. A, B, C. So better try to use some readable names. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. And Python variable names are case sensitive also. So just understand that. Just follow some good readability, because most of the times the program written by one person, nobody else can read. So that's the problem. So there are some best practices. So if you go to this link, you will get some of the best practices in giving the variable name. So this is, if you are going as a programmer, this is important. Otherwise, you don't need to worry about that. So this is some of the variable names. You can read that later. So now the sentences or the lines, right? So here, the first sentence means it's an assignment statement. If you remember, when we started, when we studied the machine learning, when we studied the gradient descent, this is something that I initially highlighted. What is an assignment?
Yeah, we had an equal to and equal to colon.
Correct.
Yeah.
Assignment is not as equal to, right? So some people think that when I say x equal to x plus 2, they get confused. So I'm just highlighting it again, because even in our machine learning, somebody was confused. So is it clear? Like when you say x equal to 2, what is going to happen? Think as the interpreter. How the interpreter does here is, it will take if it is a single equal to sign, the interpreter will take the right hand side of the value and put that onto the left hand side. That's it. Imagine the left hand side is a variable, and it is a variable means what? I just try to explain that in a very precise manner. It is the name of a memory location. So what it does is, it will write this particular value on the right hand side into the location pointed by the variable. That's what happens. When I say x equal to x plus 2, how the interpreter interpreted? Anybody?
Add 2 to x.
Yeah, it will take the current value stored in that variable and it will add 2. That's all. So this is clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you can assign a value, and it can be complicated, right? So the assignment can be a constant or a simple expression or a complicated expression. So the expression on the right hand side, and you can make it very complicated. Look at this. What is going to happen? How the interpreter interpret this?
It'll do the multiplications first and then do
With
the
what?
rest. Yeah, but what is it going to multiply with?
No, it
Well,
will. Yeah,
parenthesis first, right?
it will. It will take the original value stored in X, that memory location, and multiply with that and reassign the X. So now let me ask you a question. Let's say that X equal to 1. You put this and you execute this expression. What is going to happen? Can you explain me?
It'll 3.9 into 0.
Zero.
Oh,
Total
no.
zero.
No, let me change it. Let me make the X into 2. My intent was
Okay.
different.
2.
2 minus 1.
3.9 into 2.
No, actually, there is a data type issue, right? What is going to happen? X equal to 2 means what the interpreter does.
Oh, it's a fraction into, so it's a
It will means what
floating
is
point
going to happen
into
is,
floating point
it
into
will,
integer.
yeah, it will reserve a location in the memory, and means how much space it is going to take, the space of an integer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And store the value 2 there. And then where it comes here, what it does, it calculates this expression. And this expression is naturally, it's not an integer. And then it is storing it into X. So this value of the expression will be stored somewhere in the memory, which is a different data type, which needs more space than the original one. And then finally this X will be pointing to that new location. That's what happens. Clear?
Yeah, the end value will be a fractional value.
Correct. So, but in between, what is going to happen? The storage that was referred by X initially,
It
that
was
will
an
change.
integer, right? Yeah.
Anybody has questions on that? Okay. That's
Sorry,
exactly
Rajesh. Just to go back on that one, what will the answer be? This is 1 minus 2. So there is this order of operators, right?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. That's
Okay.
exactly what. So there's a means what I was trying to build up in a step-by-step fashion was, right, this assignment can be an expression. How an expression is evaluated?
Okay.
An expression is a combination of multiple items connected by operators. So these operators has some precedence. Anybody knows the precedence of the operators?
I think it's multiplication, division, addition,
First.
and subtraction. I forget.
Correct. So the multiplication and division has same precedence.
Right.
And then
Addition and subtraction.
yeah, but that can be overwritten by putting parentheses.
Right.
So here, what is going to happen is 3.9 will be multiplied with the original value of X, which is 2. And then that will be multiplied. This particular portion will be calculated because we wanted to calculate this first. Because otherwise, this 3.9x will be multiplied by 1, and then that value will be reduced. And then x will be reduced from that value. No, we don't want to do that.
Right.
We wanted 1 minus 2, that will be calculated, and that will be multiplied with this. That's
Right.
exactly what happens here.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is the order of expression. So these notes are in very detail. So this result will be placed to x. If x was initially 0.6, again means you can reuse the same memory location. But if x was integer, I made it a little bit more complicated. Then a new memory location will be created and x will be pointing to that. That's what it is. So let's say that what are all the expressions? So there are arithmetic expression, numeric expressions. So the arithmetic expression or numeric expressions, these are the operators. Addition, minus, multiplication, star, power, and remainder. These are the expressions. You know that, right? These expressions.
Yep.
Okay. So there are examples for this. And this is the operator precedence. This is what you are asking. So the operator precedence is this. Parenthesis will always be the first, then followed by power, multiplication, division, and then addition. This is
subtraction.
From yeah, addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. This is the order of evaluation. And the whole expression will be evaluated from left to right. Okay, so examples are given. You can refer this. This is the operator precedence. Then I always use the term called data type. What do you mean by data type? Anybody? These are ridiculously fundamental, but I just wanted to spend today's class with some very, very, very basic fundamentals.
Data type is like if it's an integer, if it's a string, if it's a floating point.
Correct. But how do you define that? Can you define what is a data type? The data.
The type of the data that's put into the variable, right?
Right. That's it. The type of the data you want to store in the computer.
Right.
Because the data can be of different types. Integer means it doesn't have any floating point value. Floating point value means float will have an integer and the decimal. Then the strings are there. Boolean is there. These are some of the type.
Right.
Okay. So now Python interpreter automatically knows, it will automatically evaluate what exactly is the type of the constants you are using or the input you are getting from the keyboard. So in this particular example, you can see you declared a variable EEE and you said hello plus there. So what data type would be this?
String.
String. But if you say E equal to e plus 1, what are you trying to do? You're trying to use an arithmetic expression between two data types which are not compatible. That will raise an error. And this is means earlier I said, right? Syntax error. Syntax error means you're not following the grammar of the language properly. So you cannot add a 1 to a string. But if you want to add means two incompatible data type, you may have to cast. So how do you cast? You can use here, you can use a keyword called str, and then you can put. So then what is going to happen is the one, the string, the constant, the integer 1 is converted into a string, and that will be added. That's what happens. And if you don't know the type of a variable, you can use a function called type. If you use that word type, and what is going to happen is, it means Python will tell you what exactly is the type of that data. So in this particular example, you used 1 and you try to type XX. Python already told that it is int. If it is 96.6, it will double the float. So that's what happens. So how do you convert from one type to the other? This is called casting. So one rule is, when you put an integer and floating point in an expression, it will automatically convert to a float. But everywhere else, you have to convert it manually. So here, what you do, like float 99 plus 100. Even if you don't do that, means it will be integer. But if you say 100.2, it will be automatically converted. Any other type, you will have to convert.
So because you can't predefine it, you have to basically define it here, right? That's the whole issue. Okay.
Especially the compatibility, right? So when you are adding a string with a number, you wanted to convert that integer into string. Otherwise, it will give an error. That's
I mean, in the other ones, you can just predefine these variables as float or integer and whatever, and then you can just use them here. But here you can't, because
even there, right? If you put a string plus an integer, what is going, you get
true. Yeah. You can explicitly cast it also. Right.
Otherwise, you will get an error. Any language, because those data types are not compatible.
Okay. I mean, it's not like I thought that e plus 1. I thought it will just think it's a string and it will concatenate.
No. It is not like that. Then the integer division, meaning this is the normal integer division. So look at these numbers. It will give different values, right? If it is a 99 divided by 100, you will get 0.99. The results. The point is, the integer division will always produce a floating point result. So let's say that you declare a variable x and another variable y, and then you divide that. What is going to happen is, you will always get a floating point value. So you say that a equal to x divided by y. And if you print the type of a, it will be a floating point number. So the integer division will always result a floating point. And this is a function, this is a change in Python 3, because Python 2, it was different. So then the string conversions. So the string conversions, you can use integer and float, convert between strings and integer. So if the string do not contain numeric characters, you will get an error. So here what is going to happen is, you have a string and you try to calculate, means you see the type of that value, right? The type, data type, it is printed as string. And now if you say that variable plus 1, you get an error. Why? Because this is a string and this is an integer. And what you can do is, since you stored an integer value in that string, you can use the cast operator. So when you use the cast operator to convert that string into an integer, it works fine. But now imagine that if this sval was ABC, then that will create an error. So when you use cast operator with a string, it should be compatible. Meaning, if the value is not an integer, or if the value is not compatible with the type you are casting, it will create error. Clear?
Yeah.
So now, any programming language, right? So it needs to get some input from user. In C, right? It is scanf, I believe. Yeah, it is scanf. There is, how do you get some response from the user? So in Python, it's very simple. You can just use a function input, and the first parameter of that would be a prompt. So when you execute this, this prompt will be printed to you, and whatever value you give, that will be the output of this function. This function will return that. So here in this particular case, it will be printing where are you, and when you say okay, that value will be returned. Want to see that? So let me go back.
Rajesh, I think you have to switch to your IDE.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
But it is not switching.
Nothing. Yeah, you'll have to.
Zoom is there. It is okay.
Yeah,
So
there
this
you
is
go.
my Jupyter notebook. So if I say,
We still see yours.
oh, you still see that. Let me share this. Share. Can you see now?
Yes, now we can.
So suppose you want an input, right? So you wanted to get a value for A. You want to say input, enter your name. When you execute it, it will ask me to enter a name. If I type it, you got it, right? So here, the trick is, you can see, it just came like that. So if you want a space, that's it. You can make it more fancy. That's it. So if you want to print it separately, print A. This is how you get input and output. And you can say that even my name is, this is a string, right? I can concatenate another string, which is A. That's it. So age. Okay, so why the error came in?
Because it's not a reserved word. It's not
No,
a
spelling
command.
wrong. Print.
It's not the right command. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. The simple solution is, if it is a valid Python keyword, a green sign will come. I have a question here. What would be the data type of A here?
Integer.
Okay. So if that is the case, this should work, right? Because if it is an integer, I can do an arithmetic division, right? Correct?
True.
Or I can say a plus 5.
I think it's taking it's a string.
You need to keep this in mind. Every time you see the input command, whatever it returns will be always a string.
String.
And if you want that as an integer, what do you have to do?
Int of.
So now, got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, okay. So let's go back. So practice that. That's very important. So this is the input function. So converting the user input, I already did that. If you want to read a number, you must convert from string to integer. That's very important. And then you can use this hash sign or the pound sign to comment a code. It's a good practice to put proper comment in the code like this. So what we have seen today is we saw the data type, we saw the reserved words, we saw the variables, we saw the operators, we saw the operator precedence, we saw the integer division, we saw the conversion between types, we saw the user inputs, we saw the comments. And also we saw a very high level introduction on Python, why Python is popular, from where the name came in, and why this language became so popular in the modern times. This is simple exercises you don't have to do. I really wanted to give the acknowledgement and contribution. It's from University of Michigan. Okay, so let me pause here. I know that it is very, but now I think, yeah, it's 9 o'clock. So we can go to the next topic. So I'm going to increase my pace from next week. Glad that you are all strong with the fundamentals. I went to this level of detail because somebody in the class said that they never touched any programming language. That is why. But now we can go in a higher pace. So we will get into these complicated some of the other data types. We wanted to understand string. There is a lot of string operations. Then we wanted to understand the set data type in Python, which is essentially the list, directory, tuple, and set. So we need to go through each one of that in detail. Then we need to know how do we use the conditional statements, which I explained a little bit earlier. And also we need to see the iterations, iterative type. How do we do that? So those will give you the basic skills to navigate through the language in a high pace. Once this much is clear, we can get into real problems. So in two to three sessions, we should be good with the very basics of the language. But any language can be, you can get fluent in any language only with the practice. So I would appreciate if you can practice the language.
Rajesh, do you have an Anaconda on your machine?
I don't have Anaconda. Why?
No, I mean, we asked everybody to install that. So I was just curious to show everybody how the Anaconda GUI is. Maybe I can launch and show if you want.
Yeah. If anybody wants to see, others can drop.
Anybody interested in it, or you go? Everybody's good.
Yeah, please go ahead. I want to see.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks, I'm dropping off.
Also, Rajesh, you will be sharing the screen. What do you call the PPTs, right?
I will share the PPT.
Sure.
Okay. I'm also dropping, Rajesh. You can show this, right? You don't need me, right, for this?
Yeah. Sure. You can drop off. Yeah. I think I'll have to. me share my screen. Share. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thanks. Let me. So Anaconda installation is very straightforward. I've already installed it. So I'll just run the navigator. When you run the navigator, basically what happens is it gives you a suite of things in it, including the Jupyter that he talked about, including another IDE called Spider. It just takes a few seconds to come the first time because it's basically picking up everything. And in the GUI that it comes up with, you can actually launch any one of those apps if you want. You have the option of adding more apps to it. I mean, I'll just show you as soon as it comes up. So this is how it comes up. So if you see this I have already installed. It's got, I mean, it comes along with it, and it comes pre-installed. This is Jupyter Lab, this Jupyter Notebook, and you have the Spider. This is very similar to what he was using on the Azure site. And then you have other ones with these. This is another editor, which is also very simple. Now this is all free, by the way. Everything is free on the on those sites. So Spider, basically, if I launch it, this is the one he wants us to use in the class. This basically gives you both the options of terminal and the script mode in one GUI. So the user interface is very simple enough to understand. It's not very tough. I guess you guys should pick it up without an issue. So this is this. Okay, just telling me there's another new version come up. So this is the console part of it, and this is the code the script mode. So like, if you remember, he was showing you the in and the outs that he was typing. So this is the interactive Python where you can actually say the input one. What was he? Input. Your name. I think I'm doing it right. Yeah. Basically, I can just say Rajesh, and output is Rajesh, right? If you need me to stop, let me know. And you can just basically copy the same thing here, which is, and I can say print my name is plus, just like what he did. I'll just try to simulate the same here. Okay, and then I just run it, execute in current console. Oh, it's running it like this. So input, yeah, exactly. So input my name, which basically I'll have to say Rajesh, and it said my name is Rajesh. Do you guys, is it fine? Do you guys understand how the GUI works? I mean, this is pretty simple enough. I mean, this is.
Yeah. This is good. Yes. So
Yeah,
Anaconda, if we install, we'll get everything. Python.
Yes. So as soon as you install Anaconda, basically it will come up like this. You'll have all of these there. So this is what I was asking, if you remember in the last class, in machine learning, what is R language? So this is supposedly the older version of something that's not used anymore. And these are other softwares which you can use. This is another software I also try to use. So basically Visual Code, VS Code, which is by Microsoft.
Okay.
This basically, you can use any language you want. It's not just Python in VS Code. You can use it for C# and everything.
I see. But what does this Anaconda navigator do? What is Anaconda?
So Python, when you go to the python.com, all it gives you is the interpreter mode, the terminal kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me try. So
this is like the IDE, like
exactly. This kind of like, it's got everything in there, and it's like a package. So if you used to Shoot.
Visual Studio.
Yeah, if you used to Visual Studio, or if you used to the other one,
Eclipse.
the Java Eclipse, exactly. Yeah. So if you used to Eclipse, so that's like a predefined, pre-packaged deal, which gives you everything. All you need to do is to start coding in there, right?
Right.
Exactly the same thing with this guy. So this guy is a Python lover. He's got everything in for Python. If you go into the Jupyter one, like he had, it basically brings you up a Jupyter notebook.
So Rajesh, do you have the instructions anywhere on how to download this Anaconda?
I can just show you if you have a few minutes. So this is how the Jupyter one works. But the Jupyter thing is only when if you have to run a program, you have to save it. So you have to save it as a .py file, extension py, and then here it will pick it up, and then you can just run it. Then it will say you. Yeah.
What was the instructor using, the Azure one? What was that?
That I can show you that. That's an Azure Jupyter. That's also free, by the way. See, this is notebooks.azure.com. So if you go here, notebooks.azure.com is the site. You can create your own notebooks, Jupyter notebooks. Basically, that's the same thing. So it'll give you. Actually, you know what? I actually do have one. Let me see if mine logs in.
So it creates Jupyter. What is Jupyter then?
Jupyter basically is just a place where you can run your programs. That's all it is.
I see.
So he is familiar with that. That's why he's using it. If you're not familiar with that, and mostly companies I think use Anaconda because that's a free product.
Okay.
You have to be online always, right? For that
Yes,
one?
that's the only issue. Yes, that is an online thing. So internet is an issue. So if you have an internet connection all the time, then it's fine. Otherwise, Anaconda is the best way to go. So this is one, notebook I had created. I'll just show you. So here, right here, this is the one that he was showing you, right?
Yeah.
Right. But the only issue, like I don't know who brought that up. I couldn't hear him. I'm sorry, Sendil. Hey, Sendil. Yeah. So yeah, like Sendil said, this one you need the internet connection all the time because it's not local to your machine.
Yeah.
Anaconda is. So, and to install Anaconda, yes, it is very straightforward. Anaconda Python. That's all you need to say. I actually did, if I remember right, I actually did share the link in the. Maybe I did it with the other group.
Yeah. So you sent it. It was fine. It took like 10 minutes because to download, but after that it was fine. I was able to use both the command prompt and so on. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So just go to anaconda.com. Go ahead, download. It's basically Anaconda distribution. That's what you're getting. So if you go here, and I can download the 3.7 version. If your machine is 64-bit, that's what I installed. Just install and just run this, and you'll end up here. And if you have any difficulties, you know where to reach me.
All right. Thanks a lot.
No problem at all.
Okay. Good night.
Yeah. Good night.
Okay. Thanks for this. Yeah, bye.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.